join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. 2. Color guard dismissed. You may now be seated.
Welcome everybody. I want to thank the Boy Scouts of America, the representatives from troop number 11 from Missoula. Can you hear me now? Do I need to start all over? I'd like to thank the Boy Scouts of America, representative of troop number 11 from Missoula and troop number 906 from Lolo. So thank you. Candidates, you want to take your seats? I'll tell you a little bit about what we're going to be doing today. We randomly drew the names of the order that we're going to go in today, and we'll be starting with Jeff. We're going to ask all the candidates to, they have 2 minutes to give an opening about themselves, tell us a little bit about themselves and what they stand for. Then we've got some questions that we, through the committee here at the Senior Center, we developed 9 questions that were sent in advance to the candidates so they could prepare. Keep talking, I'll change it. So they could prepare for them. This is called technical difficulties. Anyway, and they'll have 1 minute to answer those questions. And there's copies floating around if you want to read what those questions are. And then we'll have a minute and a half answers to questions that people in the audience have put in here. And if you want to ask a question, go ahead and write it up. And there's a basket over there to put it in. We've got a committee that will screen those. So then the final question of the candidates, and they'll each have 2 minutes to answer, is why should I vote for you? And then we'll have a social hour afterwards where if the candidates, whoever wants to stay, you can meet with them one-on-one and ask any other questions, things that weren't covered today. So with that, I'm going to start with the order that we're going in, and we'll ask Jeff Badnock to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about himself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeff Badnock, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be here today. I'm a candidate who's also a neighbor. I live just up the street, and my bus stop for Route 6 is right outside your front door. I come by here a few times a week. I was born in Montana, and I grew up in Bozeman, and I came to Missoula in 1972 to attend the University of Montana, where I earned both my undergraduate degree in political science and my graduate degree in public administration. In 1982, I began working for the city as a member of the Missoula Redevelopment Agency staff. In 1985, I became the director of the Redevelopment Agency. I hope you're familiar with some of the work that we did at the Redevelopment Agency. It includes the work that we did, of course, down on Missoula's riverfront, creating Karis Park, Bess Reed Park, Clark Fork Natural Park, Evelyn Borg Johnson Park, the Riverfront Trail System, and we also did other work with private developers to do historic preservation, build new buildings, public infrastructure, including the downtown parking garages, as well as improvements to City Hall, the county courthouse, numerous street, sewer, and sidewalk projects. We also did all of the downtown street trees that Missoula enjoys so much. That work gave me a lot of experience working with lots of different people to solve problems. That's one of the key strengths that I bring to the office of mayor. If you choose to elect me, you'll get someone who knows how to solve problems and work with people to get things done.
If I could interrupt a second, I forgot to tell you guys about the lady. about the timekeeping. Frank's doing the timekeeping, 30 minutes, 30 seconds, 30 minutes before the questions supposed to be ended, and then he'll ring a bell for you to stop.
Good afternoon. My name is Clayton Floyd. I'm running for mayor, and I've represented Ward 6, which is south of Wyoming, to University Motors from Russell Street to Reserve for the last 4 years. I didn't have a burning desire to be a politician. Matter of fact, in my book, I was one of those folks who used to make jokes about politicians, and then all of a sudden I was one. But I felt like City Hall was not listening to the concerns, and the current mayor, was not listening to my concerns. So I felt like I needed to jump in and try to do something about it, and to articulate the discussion a little better than it had been articulated in the past. And I think I can honestly say that after 4 years on City Council, folks understand the issues a little better with a little broader perspective as a result of my being there. I moved to Missoula in 1960. I was a 7th grader at Willard at the time. Lived here ever since, had a variety of experiences for job, and the last 30 years I've been in the insurance business, the last 20 owning my own agency. Been married to my wonderful wife of 38 years, Paulette, which I gave her Halo papers a number of years ago for having put up with me that long. We had one child, Laura, who provided us with a grandson who's now 5. Like so many children that are born and raised in Missoula, she did move away for a while. Unfortunately, she's back. I belong to St. Paul's Lutheran Church, which is just around the corner. And I believe that if I get the opportunity to be your next mayor, that I will bring a degree of ability to listen and engage the public that isn't there today. Thank you.
My name is John Durazzi, and I also want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you people here today. And I'd just like to set the record straight a little bit. It may have been misconstrued, or I want you to know that I'm a Missoulian. I'm a 3rd generation Missoulian. I've been here, worked here, went to school here all my life. I've seen the changes that have come, and I see the changes that are in the future. I'm an independent auto dealer. I've been in that business for 30 years. Also, I'm still an active member of Missoula's MLS Realtors Association, the multiple listing service. So I have a 14-year background with some real estate history there. It gives me a little bit of insight to things that are coming around the corner. I know there are issues, there are large issues. We're hopefully going to have some answers for you today. And I'm running for mayor just basically to represent you. I am basically just like you. I'm concerned. I've been voting all my life. I found out that sometimes that what you want just doesn't quite happen downtown. And I feel that there's a problem in the system, and I'm hoping that I can change that problem. I believe I can gel City Council to one focus, and that would be for the better of the whole community and valley. I know that it's not going to be an easy task, but I'm willing to give 4 years to try to get it done. So, thank you for today.
It's an honor and a pleasure to be here this afternoon. My name is Jerry Ballas. I currently represent Ward 4. I've been doing that for the last 6 years, and I've been reelected to 1 term. Except for the 6 years that I spent in Bozeman getting my architectural degree, and the 3 years I spent in the Army serving my country, my whole life has revolved around Missoula. Coming to the Senior Citizen Center is kind of like coming back to my roots, because for the first 12 years I spent right down the street on 5th Street here. I lived up and grew up in this area. And my dad was a railroader, an engineer on the Milwaukee Road. He ran the Hiawatha train. I went to school with Jerry Billings' daughter, who both went to St. Anthony's. So I have a lot of roots in history, and coming back this place has changed so much down here. I counted, there used to be 4 grocery stores that we used to go to. And you don't see that anymore. Now you got to go clear out of town to get your groceries. So that was part of neighborhood character. And I spent 34 years listening to people, helping people design homes, helping the Missoulian build its new building, helping Big Sky build a school, helping fire stations. I've worked with Public Works, I've worked with the Planning Department, I've worked with the Health Department, I've worked with just about all of the agencies that help control our lives. I understand in a very real sense what it means to be a senior citizen, because I'm at that door and I'm trying to hold it closed, but it just won't stay closed. So we're trying to figure out how to deal with retirement. And we need to hear from you, because you people represent the experience in Missoula, and I want to hear from my senior citizens as to what they think is best for the community. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Good afternoon. My name is Luann Crowley. I'm glad for the opportunity to speak with you today, and I'm glad we're focusing on your issues. You're the ones who have helped make Missoula the town it is today. You have raised your families here. You've run your own businesses and created jobs for others, or you've given dedicated service to the jobs that you had. You've supported the school system and the development of this town with your taxes. You volunteered at the library, the hospitals, the senior center, and at your church. You've grown gardens and shared the harvest. You've helped friends through tough times. You've helped create the tremendous sense of community that we all enjoy in Missoula. And we owe you a debt of gratitude for that. As you look to your future, you need a mayor that appreciates your contributions and understands your needs. I will be that mayor.
Good afternoon. My name is John Engen. Thank you for having us this afternoon. I was born in Missoula and grew up here. My folks still live in the house that I grew up in at 734 South 2nd Street, not too far from here. And I spent a lot of time in this room auctioning pies and a few other things. I recognize some of you from this room and from lots of other rooms around town. As mayor, I'd like to continue the service that I've engaged in as a city council person, and before that, as a community volunteer, as a private business person, as an employee of the Missoulian, as a writer, as a student, as a community member. I believe that the city of Missoula can and should continue to provide excellent community services to all of us. I believe that quality of life is important to folks of all ages in Missoula, and that's represented in lots of ways, whether it's looking up at a clean, beautiful hillside in spring or even late summer as it turns brown. I believe that those open spaces and parklands are important for all of us. I believe that sidewalks we can maneuver on, that streets we can drive on, even bike lanes that we can pedal on are important to all of us. And I believe that we need to continue to provide housing opportunities for folks of all ages in our community, whether you're 60, 70, 80, 90, or in some cases 20 or 5 or 3 or 1, and everywhere in between. Housing is important, and affordable housing is really important. And as I looked over the questions that we're going to talk about today, I think that housing becomes a more critical issue for folks who want to remain in their homes as pressures on taxation become greater and greater. And we'll talk about that more. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Now we'll go ahead to our first prepared question. And the question is, and we'll start with Clayton as we move through the order. As Missoula's neighborhoods have grown and the taxable value of homes has skyrocketed, so have the corresponding SID and property taxes. Because we live on fixed incomes, seniors are unable to absorb these increases. Please describe your plan to prevent seniors from being driven from their homes because they are unable to pay these taxes or SIDs. And also, I want you to keep in mind that the taxes go for things like play ball park and the aquatic center, which a lot of our seniors don't use.
There we go. I love this question because in the 4 years that I've been on council, I've raised this issue over and over again because we tend to forget as we ask of Missoulians one little thing here and one little thing there, and pretty soon it's serious money that we're talking about. And we forget that a lot of these SIDs are paid over a 20-year time frame. So we start piling one SID on top of another. For instance, right after I was first on council, the folks in the Wapaki area who probably have 5 more years left on their SID for sewer started to pay for the big pipe in the ground for storm water drainage. And then I said, if we have sidewalks on top of that, which that area is fairly deficient in sidewalks, pretty soon you've got $25 for this $150,000 home there, $25 for this, $25 for that. You have very serious money sooner or later. And then on top of that, when you look at things like sewer fees, which we all get to pay if we're hooked up to the sewer, in the last 5 years, those have almost doubled. So it's not just a matter of this little one or that little one. Pretty soon it does get to this question. And I think the way we can go about that is reminding council as the mayor that, we need to be cognizant of the total sum that we're asking of folks. Thank you.
Thank you. One thing that I don't know if you're all aware of, is that with the Department of Revenue here in Missoula, for people on fixed incomes and seniors, that you get in touch with the Department of Revenue, that it all depends on your income, your ability to pay, but if you qualify, your taxes can be cut in half. That program is here for the seniors of Missoula, and hopefully you're aware of it and that you can take advantage of it if that fits you. But that is intact now. On the other hand, as Clayton mentioned, it has been the numerous requests for tax increases, for bonds, and for issues that don't involve you. I believe that a person should be able to budget city government to where there is some left for the care of the seniors. So if you can trim bureaucracy, you can take care of the citizens better. And that's what I'd be looking at as mayor.
Just a great question. In 6 years, I've only voted for 2 budgets at the City Council. Every other budget I've voted against because City Council members have voted to increase expendable fundings that I didn't think needed to be increased. I've sit here and I've tracked my taxes for the last 20 years. And I've seen them grow up. In 1986, my taxes were 356. Actually, my home payment was $505, and my escrow payment was $148. 1996, that escrow, the payment went down because I refinanced to get a lower rate. The payment went up 321. My escrow was $180.98. 2006, my payment is now $581. My escrow is $259. It's gone up 43% in the last 10 years. With Jack Reedy and myself, it's always been a concern. I've actually, in Missoula, I helped them delay their annexation into the city because they wanted a sewer out there, and I know in that community they couldn't pay the taxes and the city sewer. So I worked very hard to get those, and I've worked in other areas to delay annexation and to help people get off their taxes. So thank you.
The first thing we need to do is become more aware of the fact that seniors are experiencing such pressure from all these SIDs. We need to hear from you. The second thing that I would do is launch a public awareness campaign talking about the elderly, homeowner, and renter credit. I'm not sure if seniors know all the benefits or the tax relief that is available to them, and that's important. There are deferred payment systems for the SIDs. If seniors know what's available, if we can organize them, then perhaps we can go to the legislature and talk to them about relief for taxes. I think it's important that you communicate more to us, to the policymakers, so that we become aware of the burden that we are placing on you and find better ways to raise the money that we need to raise.
You know, my dad is 83, and for the last number of years, we've been talking a lot about my trust fund. He says, "I trust you, there's no fund." I'm well aware of the pressures on folks with fixed incomes, and one of the things I've tried to do as a city council person is to make sure that we engage in all sorts of practices whenever possible to temper the tax burden on everyone. One of the ways we've done that is through impact fees. We charge now impact fees to folks who are building new homes so that those new homes pay in part for the capital stuff that you've put on the ground through years of paying taxes, fire departments, police stations, and the like. That's one of the ways that we keep from reaching into your pocket further while still providing the kind of services that we need to provide in a growing community. I think that's important. That's one of our techniques. The other is we've adjusted our user fees across the board to better reflect what it costs for us to do business and what folks ought to be paying to engage in some of those practices. And that's an equity issue, and that's one of the ways we try to make things fair and keep your tax bills down. Your tax dollars also, by the way, support organizations like Missoula Aging Services. And Susan is here today, smiling, hoping for more money, now that I'm invoking her name, right? And so we try to offer opportunity for those folks as well to help you.
Did Clayton do a good job of turning this on? Okay. One of the problems with being the last person to get to answer questions is everybody says all the good stuff first. And I can only say that I agree in principle with just about everything that's said. We have to recognize the burdens that city policies and city expenditures place on taxpayers. And it's not just the senior citizens, it's people with fixed incomes of all ages. It's a burden when the taxes go up for anybody. And we have to be mindful of that. With respect to the issues of seniors, yes, we need to help seniors understand, or help us understand the problems that you face with the tax burden. We have to be able to quantify it. If there are people who are losing their homes, we have to know who they are. We have to know how many. We have to know how big a problem that is. If it's just a couple, if it's one or two, maybe there's an easier way to solve the problem, to lessen their burden, so that doesn't happen. As mayor, I promised that I would do one thing when I submit my budget, and that is ask the question, a very simple question: who benefits, who pays, and what's fair? And I think that citizens of Missoula deserve that.
Thank you, candidates. Our second question, and we'll start with John. Seniors who lose the ability to drive face major lifestyle changes and are at much higher risk of isolation, depression, and health problems. In Missoula, accessible, affordable, alternative transportation for seniors is non-existent. What steps would you take to solve this problem?
Well, once again, I would hope that people are aware of some of the programs. There are senior companions in Missoula. There's also a volunteer program that works in other cities, and it's a senior citizens volunteer program for seniors among seniors who are still able to drive and things. And it's all voluntary. It's just an avenue that perhaps you people could pursue for yourselves. As far as city government is concerned, to try to help you with your transportation needs, well, as you've already stated in your question and stuff, the help's fallen quite short. One place that I may look forward to trying to get some relief and assistance would be from the medical community that we have here in Missoula. There seems to be a bit of wealth there, so to speak, that perhaps some vans and some transportation provisions from them would not be an impossible task for them to help you. Perhaps the mayor could coax them a little bit to see if it could be goaded. One other thing that I know for a fact is that you cannot make an appointment with the taxi cab service here in Missoula. If you have a doctor's appointment, you cannot make an appointment ahead of time. So perhaps you should look at another taxi cab service that may be funded by government a little bit. Thank you.
I'm going to jump back real quick on the previous question. I'll take just a couple seconds. Tax relief, we heard about all the tax relief programs. The one question that I've heard is that there isn't necessarily that one person out there to help you deal with some of those programs. So one of the things that I've been thinking about is bringing somebody into the mayor's office to help people deal with the programs and to go through the red tape and the paperwork. As far as transportation, you know, my Lions Club was one of the first clubs that helped this organization buy its first bus, and that operated for a number of years, and it provided transportation solely to the Senior Citizen Center here. I got to take issue a little bit that transportation is non-existent, because I've talked with a number of people around Missoula, people that have had heart attacks and have needed special transportation to get around, and they say, there is transportation available throughout the community. The problem that he found is that there are multiple people out there doing different things, and trying to get it all coordinated in one place is the big problem. And then everybody, the money that is out there, we got a number of organizations that are fighting for the same dollars. So I think the mayor needs to take the lead on it and try to coordinate some of the multiple programs that are available in this community. And it's not just in transportation. We have people coming up with good ideas for a lot of programs, and some of them are duplication and some of them compete with each other. So the mayor's office needs to take a leadership role in that, and trying to coordinate the activities to make sure that we serve everybody.
I'm going to focus on one aspect of this question. It talks about the private vans. That's the iRide van pool. I sit on the board of the Missoula River Valley Transportation Management Association, and they are the ones that provide this service. Now, the service for seniors runs 9 to 3 during the day, and that's because during peak hours or transportation times when people are going back and forth to work, those van pools are busy taking people either home or to work. And the reason that there's a problem is they only have the money to cover 1 day a week in providing that service to you during the 9 to 3 time slot. So I would work with seniors to find volunteers who would drive the van pool the other 4 days, so that could expand the program to 5 days a week. This is the kind of issue that makes me realize we need a senior advisory council to the mayor to handle these issues and keep them in front of the mayor and the council.
One of the things that comes to mind when we talk about transportation issues is, where do folks need to be transported to and from? And that comes to having to do with where you live. Where do you live, and where are the services that you need, and how do you get to and from? I think if we provide some opportunity for clean, safe, affordable housing that's more proximate to services, that's closer to the things we need, we might be better off, and we may be able to alleviate some transportation problems. One of the things that troubles me a little bit is that the higher-end senior housing has been thrust way west of town, on the other side of North Reserve in many cases. And I'm thinking, if you're wondering about whether you should be driving a vehicle, if you're at that stage in your life, you probably don't want to be crossing North Reserve to get anywhere at any time. So I think if we can bring people closer to services with good quality housing that makes sense, we should try to do that to temper transportation problems.
Transportation is going to be a problem that's going to only increase. In the short term, we're seeing the cost of fuel increase. It's going to probably stay up for the foreseeable future. And it's not just going to be seniors that suffer, it's going to be the entire community. We need to address this problem head on. We need to be aware of it. We need to focus on it. Because it's going to be a problem that we're going to solve as a community. It's not going to be something that we can say only the wealthy or those with the means get to drive and those who don't have the means can't get around. We have to do better. I think in the short term, as been said, we need to coordinate the resources that we have better. There's a lot of things out there. There are vehicles out there that would be suitable for senior transportation. Are they being used appropriately? Are they being used efficiently? Are they being funded correctly? Have we integrated volunteer services with the programs that exist? Those are all things that we can do in the short term. In the midterm, I think we're going to see a demand for an increase in the Mountain Line service area. We need to have our bus service, our public transportation, serve more parts of Missoula more efficiently. When that happens, we need to hear the voice of seniors tell us where those service routes have to be. In the long term, we have to do better with our community planning so that the housing, as John said, is in the right place.
Housing, even if it's in the right place and is as beautiful as you could possibly want it, still doesn't solve the issues of impaired mobility and the lack of transportation. We have a number of programs. I've been fortunate enough to be associated with Missoula Aging Services, and I know that that organization tries to serve seniors in many ways. I think the problem is that we haven't provided enough assets to those organizations that are already in place doing the job. And I think there's a number of ways that government could provide additional funding for programs that are already in place, meeting the need as to the best of their ability. We just need to be able to increase their ability. Transportation district might be one of those things where we could actually form a transportation district and have that cost spread over a wider area to assist. And I have great insight into this because of the 4 parents that were involved in my immediate family. My father's deceased, my mother doesn't drive, my mother-in-law doesn't drive, my father-in-law does drive. And I think it's almost at a point where we need to be looking forward to be able to provide this service as our citizenry ages, because as an insurance agent, I'm keenly aware that we don't want to be forcing folks to take a panic drive to be able to get around to meet their needs. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Our third question, and we'll start with Jerry Ballas. When you are mayor, if the city council should become gridlocked as this last one was, what steps would you take to address the situation to enable the council to get on with business?
Again, I've got to take a little bit of a difference of opinion as to the premise is that the city council is gridlocked. I don't believe our current city council is totally gridlocked. We do an awful lot of things that you don't see that go to the consent agenda, and we agree on an awful lot of things. There are a couple issues that this community has been struggling over, and there's a number of us on the council felt that we needed to take drastic action to change that, and we have. It's unfortunate that the council happened to be split almost down the middle, and we get boiled down into arguments. I've been one that have tried to change some of that when their first argument was who's going to be council president, and I felt Jack Reedy, with all of his experience, was one of the best ones to go ahead and try to lead us, and so I eventually helped get Jack continue as president. I've done that in a number of conditions. As mayor, what I want to do is reach out to the council and involve them in some of the decision-making process early on before it hits the council floor. I don't think the mayor's been very good at that. I've had a lot of experience in that, helping school districts develop school bond issues and plans and bringing community together. And my goal would be to try to do that on the council and approach the council before we get into the critical phase.
I think Jerry's right in that gridlock sells papers. We generally get along pretty well and we attend to the city business. And I think we've learned a lot from the current administration on what not to do. The important thing is to bring council people in at the beginning of projects so everybody feels like they have equal knowledge of what's coming down the pike. As mayor, you bring council members in from each ward, 2 at a time. You support them in what they're doing in their ward. You let them know that they have the resources of the city to back them in what they want to do in their ward. I think the main thing is that you respect both sides of an issue. There's the 51% and the 49%, and each has its value. So even if you're on the winning side, you still need to reach out to the minority and let them know that their ideas are as important as yours.
And I agree with Jerry and Luann that gridlock is probably not the most appropriate word. And as the person who's been chairman for the last 3 years of the Plat Annexation and Zoning Committee, which is the committee that deals with all of the nasty issues associated with land use and some of the good issues as well, I know how to listen to folks, how to engage them, and I think how to find middle ground whenever possible. We also need to push our way to decisions occasionally, and that's one of the difficult tasks of leadership, but it's very important. Eventually, after the minority is heard, the majority needs to take action and move forward. That's not always easy or pleasant, and I think we can do it in ways that don't hurt anybody, and we can continue to get along and make progress and make good decisions. The other thing that I think that's important is I don't think any of us has to wait to become engaged. I've never waited for the mayor to come tell me about something I'm interested in. I've always gone to him to ask, and that's the way I'll perform as mayor. I'll go to you to ask, I'll go to council folks to ask. If I need answers, I ask the questions.
As I've said many times, I'm not running for mayor to pick fights with the council. And if I were mayor, I would want to do the work before gridlock occurred. And as I've said on a number of occasions when we've had these forums, the first thing I would do as mayor is try to find the person on the council that I thought was least like me and offer my hand and roll up my sleeves and say, let's work together. Tell me what we can do together for the betterment of our city. And that's my attitude. Sometimes I think the public is dismayed when they watch the council work. They work in committees, yes, they work on the council floor. Sometimes what the public sees is sneers, eye-rolling, squabbling, and efforts to make the other people look bad, whether it's to make the mayor look bad or other people on the council look bad. I think there's probably occasions when you see that as I do. If those people were your children, you'd send them to the corner and ask them to sit there until they learned how to behave. Whether you gave them a spanking or not, I don't know. But I think we need to be able to do better. We need to take the level of public discourse to a higher level. We know what it means to be civil to one another. We know what it means to be polite to one another. We know what it means to listen. We know what it means to respect. When we lose those things, we lose a very important handle on what it means to be able to do the public's business. And it's a disgrace when we do that.
I think the notion that council is in gridlock, unfortunately, is promoted by articles like the one that was in The Independent giving us all an F. I think it's healthy to have debate, because if you were getting 12-0, 12-0, 12-0 from your council, I would submit to you some folks weren't very deeply engaged in the process and probably didn't know what it was they were voting on. I think it's good to have discussion. I think we've tried to keep that discussion relatively civil. And at times, yes, we do disagree. I think the problem right now is that we have not had a lot of support from the office of the mayor. He's tended to favor one faction in the council over another. And that creates a sense of some of us are in the minority. That is not a good thing. We all deserve equal respect and we all deserve equal time. We haven't gotten it from this administration, and at times we haven't gotten it from one another. We all need to take responsibility for that. I would see if we couldn't find the common ground, because there has been common ground in every issue that's been before us. When there's an opportunity to go back and revisit an issue, we need to find out what went wrong the time before. And it's nobody's fault that it didn't work out the way we intended, but we need to improve, because the ones who ultimately pay the price if we don't do a good job is yourselves.
Well, without much affliction of pain or anything, I think that your question must have been miswritten and you should send it back to committee. Anyways, no. I believe that the mayor's position is like the head football coach. He's got 12 assistant coaches there. They have to get on the same page. And the perspective and the objective of that council and mayor has got to be the outlook of the city. Yes, council people represent their wards. Council people have to understand that they vote on things that affect everyone in this town and everyone in this valley. It doesn't stop at your ward. So the mayor's job had better be a good one of explanation to council people of what they're really doing when they're sitting down discussing issues. And if things would come across the table that are good for one part of the town and affect adversely to the rest of the town, that issue is not a good issue, and that should not waste council's time. I want to just let you know that these things I've observed. I've personally taken part in some of these downtown, and the system that we have is supposed to be a good one, but I believe personal agendas has gotten in the way, and that there are certain attitudes that that just won't gel. So the opportunity is here. 6 new council people and a new mayor for Missoula. There's time for change.
Thank you, candidates. Our 4th question will start with Luann. Access to affordable health care for seniors is already a major problem. Some local health care providers are refusing to accept seniors with only Medicare coverage. Even some seniors with both Medicare and supplemental insurance policies are having problems finding a health care provider. If you have any control over this, what steps would you take to expand the availability of health care services to low and moderate income seniors?
You know, this issue of increasing costs for our medical expenses hits everybody. I mean, even the city's healthcare plan has changed dramatically over the years, and their benefits have decreased, and they've had to pay more for that. So we understand this. I want to introduce you, if you don't know already, to a wonderful service that we have called Partnership Health Center. It's located right near the health department, and it takes Medicare and Medicaid. It takes anyone who comes in. And once you are a patient at Partnership Health Center, they have an in-house pharmacy that can give you very dramatic decrease in your prescription costs. I think this is something that should be included in an annual report card to the city. It will show how are we doing on these things, how are we making services available to folks like you, and to help you bear the costs of these things. This is something that's definitely worth looking into, and I think it will be a benefit to anyone who can get there.
Boy, affecting healthcare policy on the local level is an extraordinarily difficult piece of business, and I think the best thing that any mayoral candidate can do is join with you in voting for candidates for federal office who are interested in serious health reform for our country and all of its citizens. It's extraordinarily important. On the local level, a few things we can do. One is continue to create a community that's attractive to businesses that create good-paying, solid jobs that support families. Those jobs and those support systems and those families help create the tax base that helps us do all the other things we do in our community, ranging from nonprofit enterprises and supporting organizations like Missoula Aging Services to our public assistance that manifests itself through organizations like Partnership Healthcare. If we have a thriving community and a thriving economy, we have a better shot at taking care of the folks who might slip through the cracks.
When I was at the redevelopment agency, we were asked to be one of the partners in helping the Partnership Health Center be built. And I can't tell you of a project that I was happier to be involved in. It was a wonderful concept of pulling together the hospitals, the healthcare providers, the health department, the city, the county, and others to create this facility that could provide health care for those who couldn't otherwise afford it. And I have been very pleased to be in a community that such a partnership could come together. As John said, affecting healthcare policy on the local level is extremely difficult. Most of the funding for it, of course, comes through the state from the federal government. It's that area where the policy is, I think, in the biggest difficulty. It's where we need to do most of the work. But we have a lot of good advocates for that. We do have a lot of people who know how to turn that policy around. We can help them. We can support them. We can add our voices to theirs to change the policy on the federal and at the state level. It's something that has to be done.
I would like to see what we could do, first of all, to find additional funding for some of the organizations, again, like Missoula Aging Services, who do address this to some degree. Partnership Health Services is another one that we've had a hand in. But I think we should also go out and seek collaborative efforts between the medical community and the city of Missoula, because I think there's a great example that Public Health Service, or Partnership Health Center rather, had in asking dentists in particular to come and treat Missoula's low-income families. I think there's many wonderful physicians in this community who would be more than willing to dedicate part of their time and ability to helping Missoula's most needy if we were to only ask them and form a collaboration with them. And maybe there would be something that we could do in exchange that would be helpful to the medical community here for providing that service. But we haven't even made that attempt. So I think that would be a great step in that direction. And then I think the other thing that comes into play is prescription drugs. And I think certainly if we could establish like a clearinghouse to help those folks who qualify as lower moderate income to be able to get those drugs because they were purchased in larger quantity and bulk, I think that would go a long ways towards making that less expensive.
I also have been involved with healthcare. My mother is, she's going to be 80 shortly, and she's been ill for a while now, and I'm getting kind of familiar with places. I'm definitely getting familiar with the setups at Community and St. Patrick's Hospital. And in your question, you're looking for a provider, and I understand that to mean like a single, your main providing doctor, not the specialist or such, because I've had no issues where any specialists have turned us down on the Medicare that my mother's on. So I think on the provider level, what we should do is push, again, the medical community to bring in just your general practitioners to take care of the main providing medicines and such that the care you are looking for. By experience, I see that they cannot, if you have Medicare, that they cannot turn you down for emergency services or life-threatening or prolonged care for certain diseases. So hopefully there would be a way to create just more doctors and maybe less specialists.
Extremely extremely difficult question to answer because I don't know how at the local level we can really affect some of our things that are going on in Washington, D.C. unless jointly we can get together and talk to some of our reps that back there and lobby them to solve problems that we have out here. As the mayor's office, though, we need to know specifically what those problems are, and we need to hear more from our senior citizens as to what some of their needs are. You know, we're all county residents. We all pay a tax to the county to run the health department, but I don't know that the city has that much direct coordination with them. And I think we have a council representative that sits on the health board, but we need a little more communication between the mayor's office and the council. Health insurance, I think, is another big, huge issue that affects medical practitioners and affects their viability. If we can find more ways to help businesses provide health insurance for all of their employees that can improve on the payments that the doctors receive, then maybe the doctors have more flexibility on treating our senior citizens, and especially in their golden years. So we need together, we need to form a joint endeavor to hit Senator Burns and Senator Baucus and the Rehberg when we need help in those special health care areas.
Thank you, candidates. Now we'll take some questions from the audience, and we'll start with John. First question, what are your thoughts on occupancy standards?
I didn't support the occupancy standards ordinance that came before the Missoula City Council probably 3 years ago, and time flies when you're having fun, so my date may be off a little bit for a couple of reasons. One is I don't think there's any way we can enforce it, and two, I don't think it's legal. That's not to say that there aren't issues associated with too many people living in the same house. There are myriad issues ranging from parking to obnoxious behavior to overcrowding to safety, all of which I think we can address through regulation and enforcement, but occupancy standards I don't think is the way to do that.
Thank you. I agree with John. One of the hardest things for our neighborhoods to endure is bad behavior. I don't think it really matters how many people or what people live in a home. It's behavior. And I think that we've made a connection between behavior and occupancy that's not as ironclad as some would like it to be. If there are rules to live in a community, if there are responsibilities that we all have to take to make the community work, to make our neighborhoods work, well, we need to figure out how to do that. I know people who live in what would have been a violation of the occupancy standards had they passed. They are law-abiding, good neighbors. They have gotten together because economics demands it. They can't afford a mortgage without taking in unrelated roommates. And that's something, I don't think those people should be penalized. If they're living according to good neighborhood principles and they're being good neighbors, why should they be forced to break up their household?
Well, if you went back and checked the record, I was for the occupancy standard, but I think some of the issues didn't get represented very well in that effort. First of all, I do think it would have been legal. Myself and Rick Baskett, who's an attorney here in town, spent an inordinate amount of time trying to draft and redraft it to make it bulletproof, if you will. We did contact the Human Rights Commission on more than one occasion. And that didn't mean we were anti-student, which I guess was the primary thing that came across in that whole discussion. The behaviors that prompted us to bring an occupancy standard forward were noise, alcohol, parking, and for myself, there was even a more critical issue, which was the safety of the inhabitants themselves. When you live in an overcrowded condition, you were getting all kinds of things, but by the grace of God, we didn't have any tragedy, because about 2 years ago, after we'd had this discussion, I don't know if any of you would recall, but it was over in the university area. There was a gentleman who lived in a basement apartment. He escaped the basement apartment, but by the grace of God, somehow woke up, went upstairs, woke up the 4 folks upstairs. There was 5 folks in that home. They wouldn't have gotten out of there if he had no smoke detectors, the cause of the problem, an extension cord that overloaded the circuit and shorted out. You can't ignore those things. The one thing that the local government is charged with is protection of the public health, safety, and welfare, and I don't think we're doing a very good job when we allow it to continue.
Well, I wasn't part of any earlier votes or discussion of occupancy standards. I would probably put the burden on the health department to see what's livable conditions, and I'm hoping that that's maybe the direction that it started and such in there, that they've already discussed the problems that are caused when there's too many people in a house. I mean, and I think it's kind of directed at youth, perhaps some students and such, but they're struggling for places to live. And that all comes back down to where can you live in Missoula. So if it's not a health risk, if they're not too dirty, you're going to put up with some noise and stuff. I mean, that's youth. That's there. That was there 30 years ago for myself, even maybe once or twice. But it all boils down to housing. It all boils down to people being able to afford to live on their own. They don't necessarily, I don't think, want to live with 6 people in a house or anything. I really don't think that that's the standard that you set for themselves. That's what's been more or less forced upon them.
Occupancy standards is one of the issues that I did support. It's one of those that people would think, well, maybe the council was divided on it, and we certainly were. We split right down the middle, and the mayor broke the tie on it. And our senior council person, Jack Reedy, was adamant that he thought we needed to be occupancy standards. You know, I've only owned my house for some 34 years, and I've had a lot of renters next door to it. And, you know, when you get a little bit up in age, you're people that start having parties at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning, and they have 10, 15 people there. It gets to be pretty annoying when you're doing that year after year after year. At some point in time, you got to find a way to solve it. We were told that the boundary line adjustments were illegal. We had a city attorney's opinion on that. I happened to challenge that issue because I had other people in the community tell me that they weren't legal. And we've got a judge that has questioned their legality of it. So I think there were issues in the occupancy standard that needed to be addressed. We weren't going after those families with 3 or 4 people that were trying to form partnerships. We were going after the renters that would bring in 5 or 6 people, each of which into a 3-bedroom house, each of which had a car, each of which parked in the alley and prevented you from getting into your space or parked along the street. And so there were a lot of problems associated with that, and I still believe we need some type of an occupancy standard.
Where did the idea of an occupancy standard come from? Back in 1996, the city abolished the family definition, and citizens were told that the city would address the impacts of the changes that were to come. 6 years later, we had had a community conversation, probably 2, and nothing had changed. We had an advisory board created, and they made recommendations, and the administration's response was, we have no money to address these recommendations. When the occupancy standard proposal came forward, I supported it as a way of telling the administration, we need to respond to the citizens who are telling us this is not the way we want to live. The impacts, as Jeff said, are the behavior. This issue is not going to go away. It's going to come again. We need to research what other college towns are doing and see where we want to go.
Thank you, candidates. Well, we're halfway there. I hope everybody's holding up okay. Next question from the audience, and we're going to start with Jeff. We're at the top of the order again. Given a far more conservative physical budget for 2007, we are out of dollars and capacity for more tax. How will you address these multiple problems?
Well, this has been a situation that every government has faced for all time. We have two apparent choices: pay more or do less. When we have the demands for government services, that's what we have to do. We can either do more in response to the demand and do less elsewhere, or we can raise taxes, and as Alan pointed out, that's not really going to be on the agenda. Well, there's two other things that we can do that go with pay more or do less, and that is plan better, make better decisions like not buying buildings only to turn around and want to sell them again, make adequate plans and preparation for things like building our community courthouse. We need to do that better. And the other thing that we can do better is we can form partnerships. We can form partnerships and do more with partners than we, the city, can do by ourselves. I know this model works because it's the model that we used at the redevelopment agency over and over and over again. It allowed us to take our funds and go further with them by partnering with other people who had funds that weren't quite enough to do what they wanted to do. Together, we could do it.
I guess part of the problem with going that direction is you're still talking about tax dollars, whether they're in the Missoula Redevelopment Agency or whether they're in the general fund of the city of Missoula. And I think the question really was, you're out of money. There's a number of things that we can do. I think the first thing we have to do is make sure we continue to provide the basic services that everyone expects from government. That's police protection, fire protection, and the infrastructure, which is our streets, our bridges, our sewers. Once we get beyond that, everything else basically is nice to have. 2/3 of our budget, each of the 4 years that I've been on here, has been involved in personnel. Better than half the personnel, almost 2/3 of the personnel, are involved in some kind of protection, either fire department or the police department. There's a limit to how far you can go cutting personnel, but it is 2/3 of our budget. There are things that we can defer in buying. Mr. Badnock mentioned the building. That would have probably added to this situation, because what the mayor asked us to do was stick another $1 million into a building that had problems. I don't think sticking good tax dollars after bad is necessarily a good way to solve this problem. We would have to cut some of the programs and some of the purchases and defer others till such time as the economic situation improved. And we do meet a cap every single year. Thank you.
I stated earlier in a forum that if I were elected mayor of this city, that one of my first jobs would be to ask every city employee for a job description from them of their duties and tasks and what they do to perform for the money they're paid. And I believe that a little bureaucracy could be trimmed relatively easily by eliminating some things that are not necessary, that are on payroll of the city. So, and I believe that in larger scales also, if there's ever to be a way to curtail taxes, the property taxes that everyone faces, is that you have to control bureaucracy. You have to control spending. So, on issues that would come forward, I would limit the studies and the amount spent on studies. There's been enough money spent on studies now that for West Broadway, for example, that would have probably built an elevated archway over for the handicapped people that are worried about getting across the street. So we have to go spend more money on studies. That would be an elimination process. I believe common sense can guide a person to simpler solutions than huge dollar studies by these groups that charge more per hour than your doctor or mechanic does. So that would be my solution.
The big project that has given us the most budget, and the budget projection is maybe for the next 2-3 years, we're going to have a very tight budget. And that was the aquatics project. It was a project that was voted on by this community. It's a project for our kids, and it's a project for the next 30 years. I think it was an important project. I worked very hard to maybe reduce that budget a little more, and I proposed some things that weren't very popular in this community, such as maybe delaying the 1% for art, which I didn't think was 100% needed in that particular project, and something that we could have done without. I think we're all challenged with making some of those decisions, and for the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to have to make some of those decisions as to what is the highest priority for the city to accomplish. The park department knows that they're going to have to delay some of their projects, and that may have to go on down into some of the other projects too. A couple of years ago, when the city had problems with this insurance program, the mayor solved it by saying, hey, all the department heads, you give me a 10% cut in your budget for a year. And we did that for about a year and a half, and we solved the problem. So I think administratively there's ways to deal with the problem. It's a budget issue, it's a management issue, it's a decision issue as to what is going to be the highest priority.
It is true that we have faced this situation before, and I recall that the figure was 3% across the board for all departments, including the council. And we did that. We also do zero-based budgeting for different departments each year. We definitely make the effort every time around to make sure that we're making the most use out of your money. One thing I think we need to do is we have capital expenses, trucks for the fire department, equipment for the police department. We need to start putting that money aside now so that we don't have to go out and bond again and again for these big items. We've talked about that, but that's one of the things that I would do, is start planning now, putting aside money for those big capital items when they come along.
I think a lot of folks might be surprised if they get into our budget process to understand that a lot of what we do is better than you might expect. Our government actually operates with some efficiency, and on the local level, I think it operates with better efficiency probably than the federal government. For example, we're required to have a balanced budget every year, and that's what we pass. During the course of the 4 years I've had to do with budgets on city council, we've had budget years that were extraordinarily difficult and budget years that were better. And in fact, last year we had a better year than we expected, and we actually did not tax at our maximum capacity. And some years that's an option for us, and that's nice, and we really appreciate the opportunity to take advantage of that when we can. Election years especially, politicians like to tax at less than the cap. We do, as Luann suggested, zero-based budgeting. Pardon me. We also, as a matter of course, I think, do our best. John had mentioned job descriptions. A trip to the personnel office today will provide you with job descriptions of just about everybody who's working in City Hall. In fact, I think everyone who's working in City Hall. One of the things we did this budget year was we provided for a cushion. So if we have a tough budget year in the future, we don't need to borrow as much, which can be critical. We've also done some things over the years in terms of building our surplus so that when we're bonded, when we go to borrow money, we don't have to pay as high an interest rate because we're fiscally sound. And that's been a large part due to the diligence of our finance officer, Brent Ramharder. So we actually do a pretty good job, and I hope we continue to do that.
Thank you, candidates. Next question from the audience, and we're going to start with Clayton. Do you support the local baseball field and possibly spending more money on it?
I love that one. I voted against both of the $1 million contributions from taxpayers to the stadium. However, in a candidate taping here for KPAX a few weeks ago, the question was asked, what do you think Mayor Cadis' legacy will be? That was a difficult question because there's a lot of things I would have liked to have said that I knew better. So I said, well, you know, 2 mayors before him tried, and Mayor Cadis finally got baseball to Missoula. And I think that's going to be judged in history as a favorable thing. should we put more money into that stadium? I guess I'd still have to vote against it because as much as I think the Osprey are loved by a lot of folks in Missoula and their average attendance is actually higher than what they projected, I think it's a private enterprise, and I think if folks want to find contributions from the private sector to make it work, I give them all my best, but I don't think that's a place for taxpayer dollars.
I believe all sports are good. I think it's something for the youth to do besides other things youth do when they're. But I think that the ballpark, at the time, that there might have been the money there for it, for the support that it did get from the city, and that it is a good thing that it is there. I also believe that any future money and stuff should come from private sector or the organization itself. Voluntary donations. I'm not a wealthy man, but I gave a few bucks to the Osprey, and I would do it again. And so, city involvement as far as that goes is the city's done its part. It's done its part. The ballpark's here. The fans base is here, and it's going to grow. So I think it was a good deal, and and if you can afford it, you know, throw $5 at them now and then. Let them build a pool if they need more stuff for money. You got a pool of money, not another aquatic one. But anyways, that's what I feel about the ballpark. I think it was a wonderful thing. The city said they had the money, so I don't blame them for giving them the money. I don't think they should ask for more, though.
You know, we need to be really crystal clear about what money was received and what it was used for. While it's true all tax money that the city uses comes from the taxpayers, the money that went to support the ballpark came from the MRA as part of their tax increments monies. The reason for those tax increment monies was to support things like the ballpark. The monies were not used to build the ballpark specifically. They're targeted for building the parking lot, building trails and access to it, and helping them bring sewer and water to that project. I supported that project not necessarily because I'm a great baseball fan, because I thought it was an opportunity to stimulate the development of a very blighted area in the city. And I think we're starting to see those fruits come through now, because through that process, the mayor, primarily responsible for this, or is a big part of it, has able to put together a group of developers that have now are going to be able to buy that from Idaho Timber that had a 99-year lease and was just willing to set on a piece of barren ground in the middle of the city, close to city services, close to downtown. So now we have the opportunity to have a good housing project down there, and I think it's going to be a great benefit to the city. I hope we can all get behind them. I don't believe in us putting more public money into it, but if we can get behind them, maybe we can help encourage the private donors to do things that will help the city.
This town has a great history of supporting things like ice hockey, the carousel, the playground over on the north side, the new symphony hall that we're going to have. We put our money into a lot of things. Now, Play Ball came in, and the first thing they did was they wanted to put it in McCormick Park. I remember the day the mayor came in with a resolution to put a new Play Ball Osprey team into McCormick Park. And that was kind of stunning. Then they realized that there really wasn't enough room. So we worked with Play Ball, the neighborhood, and a number of council people. But in the end, I didn't feel like it was a financially good move for the city, so I did not support it. And I didn't support it the second time, and 6 other people agreed with me. So I don't believe that we need to give them any more money. That money could have been used wisely, more wisely perhaps, for the aquatics. Anyway, it's not about baseball.
It's more about the financial setup that was created.
I supported the Civic Stadium before I was elected a city council person with my pocketbook. I supported it afterwards with my votes. Jerry's exactly right. The money that is associated with that project is redevelopment agency money, and that money will be repaid to the taxpayers and the citizens of Missoula over time manifold. It's a start of creating a gem in what was once a blighted area. I grew up 2 blocks away, and I tell people that's where I first learned to drink Sterno. There was a hobo camp down there when I was growing up, and it's only improved, and it's only going to get better. And I think anytime the city has an opportunity, when we talk about economic development, that's a real piece of economic development in the heart of the city of Missoula.
I think it's important in answering this question to remember how the stadium came to us. It was a project that was proposed by your friends and neighbors. It wasn't Major League Baseball that wanted to put a stadium here. It was your friends and neighbors. People in Missoula hatched this idea. They put the money together. They went to Champion International that owned the land that the ballpark's on and got them to donate that for free to the city of Missoula. We got 8.3 acres for free. Your friends and neighbors did that work. They came to the redevelopment agency and asked for help, asked for a partnership to eliminate blight. As Jerry said, the work that we did, the contribution that we made was to build the trails, the parking, to bring the utilities to the site. Then there's a very important part of this chapter that you have to remember. There was a lawsuit that was brought against the city. The city prevailed at the district court, and the people who opposed the ballpark appealed it to the Supreme Court. It took the Supreme Court 15 months to render a decision. And in that time, the price of that ballpark went up. There were commitments made. The city had made a commitment, and we were asked to step up to the plate and help out, and we did. I don't think that there should be more tax dollars put into that project. But I have belief that your friends and neighbors, the people who started this project, are going to find a way to get that done without any more public money.
Thank you, candidates. Our next question from the audience, and we'll start with John Drazzi. In light of the fire at the old sawmill site and the continuing stench from the Karis holding site near Reserve and Mullen, what are you going to do about these and other hazardous and nuisance sites that are outside the city limits, yet surrounded by the city?
Can I move? No, that's a great question. My business is 3 blocks from that fire. I got to come to work Tuesday morning with about 25 cars loaded with ash, and I had square foot chunks of asbestos and stuff laying all over the place, wondering where it possibly came from. I don't know where it came from. It was a gift from above. But the cleanup is being done now at the mill site because of the fire. I won't go into cause or how the arson happened to be at the same time of annexation or anything. I think it was coincidence. But your plant out on North Reserve, I believe, I've had discussion about that with people, and I believe it's part of our sewer treatment plant also. It's part of the problem there. So if, I mean, it's just a wonderful question, because I've had discussion about what can you do? What are you going to do with this? I mean, it flat out stinks. So given more time, I might be able to come up with something, but right now I don't know an answer.
Well, I think I've got an idea on an answer for at least the John R. Daly plant in that area out there. You know, John R. Daly has been part of this community for as long as I can remember, probably longer before I've been here. And they'd like to be part of this community. And they've been trying to find a place to move. And they've been trying to get health department's permission to move out into the airport development project. But for some reason, our health department still has problems with working with that company to get them to move. So that to me is part of the problem when we've got a good business in this community with some good paying jobs, is to try to work with those people to find better places for them to move as they've been surrounded by the city, and to form partnerships with them and to help keep them here. I'd sure hate to see all those jobs move down to Salt Lake City, and that's what I've been told can happen, because they can do down in Salt Lake City what apparently we can't do up here, and we need to find a way to change that. As far as the Champion Mill site, if we hadn't had that lawsuit, maybe we would be in a process right now of trying to develop it and change it into some parks and some housing and improve it. And I really look forward to that process. It's going to get started, and when it's going to be completed, you're going to find a tremendous new neighborhood in the heart of the city.
Actually, the first meeting to plan the Champion Mill site was last night, right here. The next meeting is going to be September 14th. And I'm sure the developers would love to see you. They want to know what the citizens of Missoula want down there. And if we don't tell them, if we don't make our voices heard, we might just get the same old, same old. This is a chance to have an exciting new place. As far as the Daily Meat Company goes, there they are. They used to be out of town. Now they're in town. And I think Jerry's right. We need to help them find a way to find a place that's suitable for them. I'm sure the health department is very involved with them almost on a daily basis, because we've heard a number of complaints. But it's important to support them in what they're trying to do and find a new place for them.
Well, I grew up smelling what was then Horner Waldorf, and we don't really smell that anymore, which is nice, and I suspect as time goes on, we'll find some solutions for John R. Daly as well. The nice thing about the mill site is that we have federal dollars that we can apply to cleaning up the environmental stuff that's down there that makes that site a much better and safer place for the community. So that's one of the pieces of the puzzle, is we're able to, through our Office of Planning and Grants, apply for and apply federal money for cleanup that would otherwise have to be borne by a developer. And that might make that land undevelopable. It might make it too expensive. So we're doing some good things there. And I think we can apply, it's a revolving fund. So we get paid back that money, and we can use that on other sites throughout our community to continue to improve them and change them from uses that are no longer appropriate or economically viable.
One of the first meetings that took place to plan the Champion Mill site actually took place in 1991 when we put together the second Urban Renewal District plan. The problem with the Champion Mill site, as was observed, is it's not in the city. It's a piece of county land that is surrounded by the city, but it's not under the city's jurisdiction. And there is a plan coming up now to annex it into the city for the proposed development that was mentioned by some of the other candidates. Part of the reason why the Champion Mill site is in the condition it's in now, is that the leaseholder, a company called Idaho Timber, is probably one of the finest examples of bad corporate citizenship I've ever come across. These people have said point blank, they don't care about Missoula. Their only care is to maximize their profit off that property. They don't live here, they don't care, they don't have to look at it, they don't have to suffer the kinds of problems that we in the city do, having that 40 acres sitting there. I'm hopeful that the developers that are working on this project are going to be able to put together a project that will create a new, vibrant neighborhood for Missoula. There's many challenges to that. Their plan has got a lot of hard work and a steep hill to climb to become successful. As for the John R. Daly, obviously this is a problem that's occurred in many other communities that have grown. Other communities have had facilities like that the city has grown up around. We need to figure out a way to work with them. We need to identify the outcome we want, which is keep them here, keep them in the right place. We need to work back from that, figure out how to get them there.
The Champion Mill site, I've been advocating for the 4 years that I've been on council, should have been annexed and provided a great new opportunity for additional housing sites. We continue to say we need to infill the city, but here we had 40 acres sitting right in the middle of the city with probably another 50 acres adjacent to it that could have been redeveloped or developed that would have created a whole new setting for Missoula's riverfront, something to truly set us apart as a city in the West, if it were done right. And we've annexed all over the place where we either had wholly surround or contiguous. In this case, this piece of property was both. So I was a little at a loss as to why we really didn't want to venture forth and apply annexation and the zoning that would have resulted from it. It would have given us the opportunity to say what we really wanted in that area by what zoning was applied to it. John R. Daly, a little different situation. That plant was just purchased by another company, and I think we need to work with them to try to keep that plant here and the jobs, good-paying jobs, as has already been pointed out, that go with it. We do need to remedy the situation, and that probably means relocating that plant, but it may be beyond us here shortly if we don't work with them. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. One of the prepared questions was, what is your position on infill development? We've got several questions from the audience. Specifically, one was, what do you intend to do about allowing infill and approving it on a lot that was too small? So getting back to what's your position on infill development, we'll start with Jerry.
Oh, great. I just love this question because it's right up my alley, or it's right down my alley right next to me. And infill development needs to be in core neighborhoods as we know it, needs to be stopped, and I think we're very close to do that. It's been one of those divisive issues that council has taken on because most of our neighbors in our wards have told us that they don't like what's going on. I've received some good legal advice that boundary line adjustments as they were being used were not a proper use of boundary line adjustments as we know them, and letting houses build on them, people build on those lots as non-conforming uses was illegal. When you made a boundary line adjustment, the legal standard should be that that's a new lot. It's not an old lot. It's different than the new one. It changes the neighborhood characteristics. It's a new lot, and it needs to comply with all of the underlying zoning requirements. And that's the only protection that you and I really have that invested in our houses out there and have thousands and thousands of dollars invested in that property is the zoning that we bought into. And that's what a number of us are trying to protect, are your rights as property owners that have bought into a neighborhood with the understanding that you have certain zoning that applies to your property, and everybody around you should recognize that and comply with it. And I think we're very close to getting that done.
The last thing somebody wants to do at night is go to bed wondering what's going to happen to the property next door now that it's going to be sold. We want to bring certainty and peace back into our neighborhoods. The feeling of predictability, that we know that what's going to be put in or added or whatever is related to what is already there. When we passed these rules in '99, our expectation was that the rules, or the tools as we call them, would apply to vacant land, the Champion Mill site, places that needed extra density but would allow for extra green space to balance that. So our hope now is that we saw that it took the citizens coming into the council in desperation, basically, saying you've got to stop this unpredictability. And now everything's on hold, and we get to start new again. And we get to honor the zoning that is there.
I don't know if we necessarily get to start new again. Some damage has been done. Clearly, there's been divisiveness in the community. And for my part, I've done my best to follow the law and legal advice and to effect change through policy. I made a referral to the City Council that produced an ordinance that prohibits folks from scraping existing houses, that straddle a couple of lots and putting up 2 new houses. That's one of the things we tried to do legally to remedy some of the difficulties associated with infill. I wasn't on the council, unlike some of the folks up here, when the growth management tools that allowed for some of these infill regulations came into play. But I have been working with these folks as we've tried to work through these issues. The only way we can fix these things are through choices in policy and through the courts. The courts aren't the best way to do it. We have no definitive answers from the courts, no matter what you may have heard here today. We have more questions than we have answers. So in the meantime, we still need to conduct ourselves as a policy-making body to reflect the long-term interests of the community while staying within the law.
Growth in cities is a situation that's not unique to Missoula. It's replicated all over the West. Does every community have the same problem with growth that Missoula does? Does every community have the same problem with zoning that Missoula does? Does every community have the same problem with infill that Missoula does? Is there anyone who's doing it right? Do we know this? I don't believe that the path that we followed with infill that meant infill of cramming 1 and 2 and 3 houses into neighborhoods scattered around Missoula was a very good strategy. It's taken some of the pressure off our growth, but it's not a good long-term strategy. I think what we need to do as a community is follow the model that we did in the downtown, and that's redevelop. We need to find areas of town that are obsolete, that are used up, and we need to assemble land more than 1 or 2 lots at a time. We need to assemble land in big enough areas that will allow us to create new neighborhoods and to do infill in a meaningful way. Not put the neighbors in your backyard, but create enough housing, planned housing in a way that it's acceptable. We know how to do this. We've seen it elsewhere. There are cities around the world that are more densely developed than we are in Missoula, and they do it beautifully. We need to learn from them and do it here.
I think this is a basic honesty issue. When we the city adopted these infill policies 6 years ago, I think there was a notion on council that we were going to be helping low and moderate income families. In fact, that hasn't materialized. In fact, there was supposed to be some trade-offs for the neighborhoods where this kind of development happened. In fact, that hasn't occurred either. What we've seen, and my area happens to be the one most heavily impacted, is there's a number of folks who, on this body, believe that this is good for the city, as long as it's not in their backyard. Well, there was a conversation that occurred in the mayor's conference room almost 7 years ago now, 6 years ago. I was at it. The complaint is that we were going against developers and realtors who were simply trying to make a living. I have no problem with realtors and developers making a living. They provide a service. They should be compensated for that service. The problem was those realtors and developers who were making those statements got in their car at night and they drove home to their nice neighborhood, and they didn't have to deal with what they were creating. I got in my car, I drove home, and I had to look at what they were creating, me and my neighbors. That shouldn't happen to anyone. To say that there's areas in this town that are used up or need to be redone is not to call people who don't live in that area. And I think we need to be very thoughtful when we go forward with these ideas that when we apply them equally. And we don't allow them to override the protections of the underlying zoning, which is exactly what's happened in this case.
Well said. Seriously, Clayton. Voice of experience right there. That's what happened by community involvement being ignored from one part of council to the other part of council. You've got to have quality control. I've advocated this since the first time anybody gave me a microphone, that you're going to have a single page, simplicity, a single page of requirements, rules, and regulations for a building permit. And that single page is going to apply to everyone that walks in that door. There's not going to be special concession. There's not going to be give and take. It's going to be, here's the rules and regulations, and by God, if you can play by them, you can play. If you don't, you can't ask. You leave. That's the simplicity of it. Quality control. Make the standards. Make the people live by the standards that you created there. And if it's going to be whatever square footage, for minimum square footage, give them a yard, make sure that they can have a dog, cat, a barbecue. Make sure that what has happened does not happen again. And let me remind you of the mill site redevelopment, and keep a close eye on the size of the lots there.
Thank you, candidates. We've got time for 2 more questions. One of those 2 will be the last question regarding why we should vote for you. I've gotten a series of questions about traffic, pedestrians, bicyclists, conflicts, people having trouble parking. So what is your assessment of the overall transportation problems in Missoula, and what can you do to solve them? And we'll start with Luann.
So I'm a miracle worker. We have problems, that's for sure. Part of it is the first thing people like to talk about is Mullen Road. And that's because we're approving subdivisions out on Mullen Road without a transportation plan. Even the highway department asked us to put a moratorium on development out there until we come up with an infrastructure plan. This is going to take effort by the whole community. We have to figure out how we get around this town. Now, we want to support and promote what we call alternative transportation. It doesn't look like this is the right crowd to be talking to, but that includes buses and trail systems, which I think you would be interested in. We want to make sure that people have access to the bus system. City of Missoula employees, the kids over at the university all have bus passes. Wouldn't it be great if you were able, as a senior group in this town, to have free bus passes on the mountain line? That's something worth working for. I think the thing is, we have to do almost like a PR campaign to think about how we want to get around this town and rethink what the priorities are, and somehow or other address it as a community.
We actually have a transportation plan, and the highway department was much more comfortable with what we were doing once they learned about that transportation plan, oddly enough. Transportation plan is about that thick off of this table. The money we have to implement the transportation plan is about that high. And that's what our problem is. We don't have enough money to do all the things we'd like to do in our transportation plan. So I think what Luann is suggesting is right. We need to take bits and pieces and bite them off as we can and move forward incrementally. We've done some of that. 30 years in the making, trying to make Malfunction Junction work better, and you can name it a lot of things, but as of yesterday anyway, it seemed to be actually working a little bit better. Maybe in another 30 years we'll be able to look at Mullen Road and Reserve Street, and there's lots of talk about a bypass as well. You know, in addition to the homes that have gone in west of Missoula, I think we need to take into account that there is an enormous Walmart store on North Reserve and Mullen Road, and the city council had very little to do with whether or not that piece of business happened there, and the impact of that piece of business I think is far more significant than any of the housing that we've done out there. So that's something to think about as well. Lots of things are in this mix. It's enormously complicated, and I wish we had more money to deal with all of it.
I think, including Luann, I think I may be the only person who's a dedicated multimodal transportation user. I ride the bus to work often, and my stop is right outside here when I pick up Route 6 to my office. On days when I can, I ride my bike. I enjoy riding my bike, and every time I get on my bike, I think of the gallons of gas I'm saving for all of you to use in your cars. I'm also a car owner, and I drive my car when it's convenient and useful for me too. I'm not a hypocrite about it, but we do have problems. I use the full range of Missoula's transportation system. It can be better. I see every place I go in my car, on the bus, on my bike. I see areas where we can make improvements. But there is not going to be a magic wand to this. Everyone is going to have to take some responsibility for this. This is not something that your government is going to be able to hand you as a miracle. You're going to have to make choices. You're going to have to take some responsibility too. And if you make the right choices, the situation will get better.
I own a bike. 95% of us get around daily in a car. And I think we just have to admit that's probably going to be a fact for the near future. And so what we need to do is to try to provide the best circulation for those vehicles as possible. And I think that's where we've really gone awry. As it's already been stated, there isn't enough money to build everything. So we put it into a prioritized list called the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program. We only fund about the top 10 out of that list every single year. But we have a real problem showing the courage to go back and revisit items that are on that list. For instance, Brooks South Russell, $6.2 million on a mildly dysfunctional intersection. $6.2 million that I'm sure could have been better spent in any number of places in this city. But because an engineer and because the administration decide they want to push it forward, it moves forward. Well, now I think we've got a truly traffic nightmare there, which is going to have a traffic calming effect without question. It's also going to push traffic into my neighborhood because folks are going to get creative on how to get around that intersection. This is not good traffic flow, and it does increase the danger to the folks living in the neighborhoods. We need to improve our arterials, and we need to put our money where it really is needed most first.
Excuse me. Again, some good things have been said there. I strongly agree with Clayton on his evaluation of the realignment of South Avenue. I personally led 2 petition drives that stopped that past years. This time it was unstoppable. It was a train, and that's why that South Avenue realignment was done. And I've got to use this one more time because I just heard this recently. That was King Cadis's big project. That was King Cadis. I just like that. Sorry, but the issues of traffic is what got me in this race, really. That's what boiled over, and I fell over, and I lost all common sense and everything. I just flat said, I'm going to run for mayor now. This has got to stop. So we're in the midst of trying to prevent West Broadway from becoming 2 lanes. And if any of you people have to ever use West Broadway, you can be thankful that it still moves now. And just close your eyes and imagine it with just 2 lanes, 1 each way. That's what's in the works, and that's what I believe I have heard from other people, that there's a little support to make sure that doesn't happen, short of a lawsuit. That was my next step, to stop them. There are alternative routes. There are other things that can be done. They're not going to get said in the next 30 seconds, Frank. But I have ideas. I live in this town. I've always lived in this town, and I've said, you know, if you open Stevens Street up from South Avenue so you can go to 39th, that'd take a lot of pressure off of that malfunction junction, folks. And they always said, boy, that's a dumb idea. So my dumb ideas, I've got to reach a little higher and see if I can get some of my dumb ideas across to some people. So thank you.
Missoula is a city divided not only by thoughts but also by a river. And whenever you have a city divided by a river and you have your major north-south have to rely on some bridges, you have major problems because people are forced to use certain arterials. Those arterials are built up over the years, but they aren't improved as fast as places grow. So we need to put our efforts into implementing our transportation plan. And boy, there's the problem, because every Tom, Dick, and Harry that gets up and speak is a traffic expert. And while I don't agree with the Broadway diet plan, I do agree once you have a plan, the best way to accomplish it is everybody get together and let's try to accomplish the plan. And the faster we can get some of our arterials improved, the faster we will improve our traffic congestion. But we can't do it when people keep filing lawsuits, dragging things out, requiring us to do more studies. But we spent 4 years talking about the Beckwith-Higgins intersection. There was a plan proposed for that for 4 years ago. If we had done it at that time, we would have that intersection. But it was delayed because people wanted to restudy it, people that wanted more bikes. But I dare say there aren't too many people here that are going to go to the grocery store on your bike. And I don't see me going to there in the grocery store in the next couple years. I've got a business. I'm glad that Jeff can ride his bike, because when he gets downtown, maybe he doesn't have to go all over the city. When I get downtown and I'm working, I may have to go out to University, I may have to go out to Frenchtown, I may have to go out to Lolo. I don't have that option. I've got to take my car with me.
Okay, and
You want me to answer that again?
and the final question, it's been a long afternoon, especially for you people. The final question, every person in this audience is asking you, why should I vote for you? And we'll start with John.
I tried to spend most of my adult life in service to my community in ways that are large and small. As a volunteer for a large number of organizations, I've believed that volunteerism is a big part of what makes Missoula a great place to live. My service on City Council, I think, has been an extension of that, and my interest in becoming mayor of my hometown is a further extension of that interest. This is about service, figuring out ways to work together. What I bring is a variety of experience. I'm a small business person. I worked for a big corporation. I used to be a journalist at one time in my life. I used to make people laugh at one time in my life. I still do, but in a much different way, I'm afraid. And I'm a citizen, just like the rest of you folks. I have roots here, and I love where I live, and I love being able to walk down the street and say hello to my neighbors, not have to hang my head. I make difficult decisions based on long-term public interest in the face of lots of short-term private interests telling me what I ought to do. A mayor is a leader. A mayor is concerned with his or her community, and a mayor engages that community to preserve our quality of life. And that's what I intend to do if I'm elected to that office. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
I spent my adult professional life in government when I worked for the city as a department head for 18 years. In that 18 years, I worked with every single city department. I know the people who work there. I worked with the state. I worked with federal officials. I worked with the county. I worked with the school. I worked with private businesses. I worked with not-for-profits. My resume is on the street. You can see what I was able to accomplish working for the MRA. You were able to see what I did for the community. I get results. I get good results. John's right. It is about leadership, but leadership is more than just dragging people along. It's providing vision. It's providing knowledge. It's providing a sense of how your community can grow and how it can improve. I have the background, I have the experience, and I have the ability to lead Missoula with the experience I have and the preparation that I've made over the last 20 years to bring me to this point. I know that Missoula doesn't speak with one voice. I know that there are a lot of people out there that have concerns about our future. I know there are a lot of challenges ahead of us. But I'm not going to be a candidate of fear. I'm going to be a candidate of hope. I believe we can do this. I believe we can make our community better. Our future is hanging in the balance. You don't want a mayor
who is discouraged? Do you want one that's optimistic and ready to roll up his sleeves and make this thing go ahead? If I'm elected to the office of mayor, you will know that we do have a plan. You'll know what that plan is because I'm going to communicate that to you as the public and as part of those who brought me to the office. I think that's been missing in a significant way in the last 10 years. There hasn't been a plan. We need a plan. I've done my work while I've been on council. I've been one of those who's not been a shrinking violet if you follow us on Monday night on MCAT. And I've stood up for folks who aren't my constituents. I've helped folks in more than one ward. When the folks up the Rattlesnake were concerned about sewer going up there, I helped those folks who were worried about that. When we talked about infill development, it didn't matter if it was in my neighborhood, or it was up the Rattlesnake, or if it was up on the South Hills. I was helpful, and I would continue to be helpful. I would continue to have a strong work ethic, doing my homework, to do the best possible job and provide the best options to the public because they would know that I'd done the research and that I knew what I was talking about when I communicated that to them. I have integrity. I've not been willing to surrender my values with one exception while I've been on council. I did allow myself to get talked into voting against a local neighbor here on his appointment to Bike Pit Board. I publicly apologize for that. I shouldn't have done that. But that is the only time I can think back over the last 4 years and say I regret that I took that vote. I think that takes a certain amount of courage, and I have that courage, and I'll bring that to this office. Thank you.
What I will bring to the office of mayor is someone standing up for you. Bottom line. I'll be standing up for all of you. And I'll be trying to guide council in direction that is beneficial for the city as a whole. As I've stated, they need to look at Missoula as a whole, the whole valley. I'm not a politician. Like I said earlier, I don't really know what motivated me do this, but Thomas Jefferson said once that it is the duty of every citizen to volunteer for government. And once his term is over, he should go home. So, I've got one term in me, and my determination would be to make this a better place. You've seen what you've gotten from your city government and your leaders downtown. And if that's the direction and path you want, you have the options on September 13th to make your voices heard. Vote on September 13th because that is your duty. I'm doing my part right now. I'm up here. I'm amongst them. And I'm doing this for you. And I think I can carry you all. Thank you.
The fastest growing population demographics in the country are senior citizens. In the coming years, we're going to find more and more senior citizens that need service. We're living longer. We have maybe fewer resources because of restrictions on Social Securities. I'm going to be joining you. In fact, I probably already have joined you. I just don't want to admit it. But I'm a senior citizen right now. In the mayor, my office, you can't help when you're part of a group to recognize the importance of that group and some of the needs of it. So my decisions basically are going to revolve around some of the things that the senior citizens need. As I develop budgets, I'm going to take the same consideration that I take for myself is my income doesn't grow very fast. I've got to live on a fixed income, and I want other people to be able to live that too. At the same time, I've been 34 years as a neighbor and invested in my neighborhood. I've been 34 years as a private business person, trying to work for myself. I write my checks, I figure my employees' taxes, I know what it takes to run a business, I sign checks on both sides of it, and I've had to fight with the problem of how to provide insurance, health insurance for my employees. Not all the time I've been able to do that. As I've got on city council, I've now become a one-man partnership, so I really rely on myself. I also sit on the chair of the Conservation Committee. I know that we have to balance our resources in this community. I know there are people that want to protect our open spaces. I know there are people that want to protect the trees in our neighborhoods that make our neighborhoods so valuable. I know that people that value parks. I know that people want transportation. I know people want a lot of services, and we have to figure out how to balance on that. One of the things that I've had to do as an architect in balancing construction budgets is figure out what's priority, where do you have to spend your money, and where do you have to cut. And you've got to watch your nickels and dimes or they'll eat you alive if you spend too many of them.
I've lived and worked in this town for over 30 years. Of the council candidates, I've served the longest, and my 9.5 years on the council have been on-the-job training for this position of mayor. I have worked again and again for the people I serve to give them a voice in the decisions that impact their lives. And that's what I want to do for the whole town. I will listen to what Missoulians have to say about the future that they want to move forward towards. Just think of all the good ideas and wisdom sitting in this room. That's what we need to hear. I want to take the love and passion that we all feel for this town and create a better future for us, our children, and our grandchildren. I want to protect the quality of life that we enjoy with a clean and safe environment, quality neighborhoods, and a thriving economy. Thank you.
On behalf of the League of Women's Voters who co-sponsored this with us and the Missoula Senior Center, we want to thank you for all coming down here and sharing your views and thoughts with us today. And I'd like to remind everybody that there's campaign literature on the back table. The Missoula Senior Center has an open house tomorrow from 11 to 2, and you don't have to be 50 to join. You have to be 50 to join, but you don't have to be 50 to volunteer. So I'd also like to thank again the League of Women's Voters and some people that work behind the scenes. Frank Kleshen, who is our timekeeper and did a lot of work in setting this up. Fran Daub, Anna Taft with the League of Women's Voters, Azera Llewellyn, there, and Annette Sontag. So again, candidates, thank you very much.